I have hit record.
And so have I now.
Alright, it's definitely sounding a lot more stable.
Alright.
3, 2, 1. Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Pixel Venture Podcast. I'm Corey.
And I am Jake. In this episode that's going to be a bit different from the other ones.
Jake, you actually said your name. It's already different enough.
Because I, Jacob, have a particular topic that I'm going to be revisiting today.
Mm-hmm. We've talked about it before on the podcast, but one thing that we were actually talking about is possibly going a bit more in depth with it, because when we started talking about it, it was very new, it was very fresh, not all the information was out there.
Yeah, there was stuff that hadn't happened yet that I've made sure to make note of. There are a couple of things I did some deeper research into, and as a heads up to everyone, we are going to be talking about the Blizzard controversy surrounding Hearthstone, Blitzchung, and Hong Kong, and I am going to be defending Blizzard.
Which is a very interesting stance, in my opinion.
So, for everyone who's still here...
yeah, for all two people who are still listening.
How this is going to go is, I'm going to start out by going through a timeline that I've put together of important events and trying to establish basically the facts around the controversy and kind of showing how it's developed and what it eventually concluded in. And then anytime during that, and there will be time after which I'll be letting Corey talk about his opinion, because he has the opinion of the rest of the world.
That's a very, very smooth way to talk about that.
And then I've made a couple of arguments of my own to help defend Blizzard and their actions. And yeah, then from there it'll basically be a free discussion.
Say discussion, but it could be a hardcore debate. It could be the equivalent of the aggression of the lightning rounds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Watch out, kids. We might not have a podcast next week.
So, without further ado, I believe I will start talking about how this whole controversy started.
Which, honestly, the full story is very intriguing. Even if you're not in the gaming space, like if you're not into competitive games, this is just something about censorship, and I feel like that's something that's important to be discussed.
So, for people who are completely out of the circle on this controversy, the game developer Blizzard Entertainment has a virtual trading card game called Hearthstone, and it has a competitive circuit in esports. And on October 6th, 2019, the Hearthstone Grandmasters held in Taipei, Taiwan, Blitzchung had just won one of a couple of games in this tournament, after which he was interviewed by two casters. At the end of the interview, Blitzchung put on goggles and a face mask that heavily resemble those being worn by the 2019 Hong Kong protesters. As he was putting them on, the casters ducked under their desks. Blitzchung said, "Liberate Hong Kong, revolution of our times," and the live stream quickly cut to commercials before promptly ending.
然后你随时可以开始，头先低下来。
光复香港，时代革命。
导播可以切回来了。
好，导播谢谢。
谢谢，好，可以了，这样可以吧？好。
And that is how the whole thing started. On October 8th, Blizzard Entertainment released a blog post on the official Hearthstone forums where they mentioned that they had removed the VOD replay so that people could not watch the event anymore.
But people recorded it, of course. It's the internet.
There are recordings, but there are technically no official recordings that Blizzard is promoting. And they said that after a review of the clip, that they decided to hand out punishments. For Blitzchung, he was removed from the Grandmasters tournament and would be ineligible to participate in Hearthstone esports for 12 months, extending to October 5th, 2020. On top of that, Blitzchung was to receive no prize winnings for Grandmasters Season 2, which was the competition he was in. Now, I'll admit it's a little bit difficult to figure out exactly how much he had won. Blitzchung himself reported that it was $10,000. Other sources say it was closer to $3,000 or $4,000. But the important part is that he had earned thousands of dollars at this point, and they were being removed. And on top of this, Blizzard also ceased working with both casters interviewing him permanently. As a specific quote from that forum post, they stated, "While we stand by one's right to express individual thoughts and opinions, players and staff that elect to participate in our esports competitions must abide by the official competition rules," which they quoted.
Well, one thing that I want to say, just real quick, as a quick little opinion, is I think that is complete BS. The fact that the casters were fired because they had no idea that he was going to do that. Absolutely no idea.
So, in the forum post, they did quote the 2019 Hearthstone Grandmasters official competition rules, which is not a long title at all.
Yeah, very close, very concise. Like, nice, healthy acronym.
And they quoted page 12, section 6.1, article O, where it states, "Engaging in any act that, in Blizzard's sole discretion, brings you into public disrepute, offends a portion or group of the public, or otherwise damages Blizzard's image will result in removal from Grandmasters and reduction of the player's prize total to $0, in addition to other remedies which may be provided for under the handbook and Blizzard's website terms." Another thing to note about this forum post made by Blizzard was that the comments were disabled, which is uncharacteristic of Blizzard's other posts, though it's possible that when there's political stuff being talked about, they're all disabled, but that is infrequent enough to really make any kind of established ruling on.
Yeah, because usually Blizzard is always open to discussion and things like that, but this was something that's just was just immediate radio silence as far as communication between the players and the company.
However, Blizzard kind of made more posts on October 8th on Blizzard's, Hearthstone's, Chinese, I have no idea how to pronounce it because I'm not Chinese. China has a social media platform called Weibo?
I can always go to Google Translate and see.
It's basically China's version of Twitter, where it's short posts, it's formatted very similarly. And the Hearthstone account on that social media platform, those in Chinese, roughly translates to, "We are very angered and disappointed at what happened at the event last week," being the Hearthstone tournament, "and highly object to the expression of personal political beliefs in any of our events. As always, we will defend the pride and dignity of China at all costs."
Which, is very, very kind, very considerate, doesn't sound like an evil corporation at all.
And
also, just so that we can get the pronunciation, I got it on Google Translate real quick.
微博
There you go.
so Chinese Twitter, got it.
Yes, Chinese Twitter, but it looks like, I don't know what their logo looks like. It looks like a deformed hand, whatever.
Now, fast forward to October 12th, which was a little under a week from when Blitzchung was banned. Blizzard Entertainment's president, J. Allen Brack, made a post on Blizzard's official forums where he defended the actions taken by Blizzard, but admits to acting too quickly and a bit harsh in terms of their punishments. He admitted that Blitzchung played fair during the competition, and thus he deserves the prize winnings that he earned by playing. He quickly follows that up by saying that he understands that the prize winnings were not necessarily the core of the problem that people were complaining about. And it was mostly about the ban and how they handled it. He states that the pre- and post-match conduct is also important in the competition, which is what they're criticizing him for. And they believe that a 6-month ban for Blitzchung is more appropriate than a 1-year ban. And that extended to the casters as well. Instead of firing them permanently, they set a suspension of 6 months to the casters, so that they could return to Blizzard if they so chose. Any thoughts on the reduction to the punishment?
I mean, my big thing is that, like, when it comes to, like, I understand with the competition there is that level of professionalism that is expected from the players, because, you know, you're not only are you playing in the competition, you are also representing a brand, you're representing a game. Like, say, you know, the League of Legends, like, World Tournament, like, that brings in hundreds of thousands of viewers. If someone said something very political, very controversial on that spread like wildfire, and you know that in each of those articles it would mention, like, the developer, which for, like, League of Legends, that's Riot Games. And that kind of PR is not good in any regard, so I can understand why they would, like, you know, be so swift to deal out what they refer to as justice, but I just see it as suppression of speech. And as far as, like, the reduction, like, I say that the reduction's fine, because if anything, like, there are a lot of players, when they look at those rule books and stuff, they don't read the fine print. Hell, the moment that you started reading, like, you know, the decimal point, that's when I knew things got serious, because nobody reads that. Like, barely anyone reads that kind of stuff.
So, that forum post was made October 12th, and things were pretty quiet from Blizzard, and in terms of, you know, points on the timeline until November 1st, when the BlizzCon opening ceremony was held. And in the opening ceremony, Blizzard usually gives a sort of highlight reel of all of the things that their franchises have to bring for the convention that year. And they decide to open it by having J. Allen Brack, the president at Blizzard Entertainment, walk out onto the main stage and have a discussion about the Blitzchung controversy, more formally and in person, in which he admitted the faults that Blizzard had made, and not only did he actually say sorry, something that a lot of people would often get tripped up on if he didn't, but he also accepted full accountability for the mistakes that Blizzard had made. He admits to not living up to Blizzard's own expectations for itself. He stated that Blizzard wants to unite the world and wants to unite fans from around the world as this center of entertainment and fun and enjoyment. And J. Allen Brack also repeated what he had made in his Blizzard forum post of some of Blizzard's mottos of think globally, lead responsibly, and importantly, every voice matters, encouraging everybody to share their point of view. Things that people criticized Blitzchung's bannings because they seem to be suppressing his point of view. He also stated that actions speak louder than words, essentially. And instead of specifically saying what they were going to do moving forward, he said, and honestly knew, that, like, making promises wasn't going to fix anything, but what would hopefully help fix things is by proving that they will do better in the future through their actions, instead of making points that they may or may not actually make. And that's basically where the conversation officially ended on the Blitzchung situation. Throughout the entire time, there's been the hashtag boycott Blizzard, where fans have been canceling subscriptions, deleting accounts, canceling pre-orders. Fan art and memes have been made, especially ones using Blizzard's Overwatch character Mei, who's a Chinese character in the game, and turning her into a pro-Hong Kong icon. Blizzard employees have gone on strikes outside the headquarters, and news sites, they're even the big ones like CNN or Time, Business Insider, Washington Post, they've all made their share of posts about the controversy, and even politicians have spoken out about Blizzard's wrongdoings.
Yeah, because honestly, it's not even like I know that I talked about how this whole thing is invasion of free speech and everything, but the thing is that it's way more than that at this point, because now you're getting involved with you're probably going to hit these points with Tencent.
Yeah.
Now you're getting involvement where there is this company that has its its fingers in another company, and so they can puppet them around, and they know that if they piss them off, they're going to lose a lot of money. And so why would they say or do anything that would be against what they're about?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry if I'm forcing you to skip ahead with them, because I know that you had an idea of sort of the flow.
No, I mean, that basically covers the timeline and most of the facts that are known about the situation. It's basically just going to flow into do you have essentially your own argument that you would like to push forward before I go point to point about different specific subjects I want to expand upon a little bit.
I think my main big opinion on this whole thing is that I feel like it could have definitely been approached in a smoother manner, because the way that they went about just stripping all of his win-ins, firing the casters, stuff like that. Okay, I understand. I understand why they would wanted to punish the player the way they did. It's way too harsh, but I understand why. The casters should not have been thrown under the bus. They had no idea what was going on. They reacted the way that they thought would be best, and when the stream cut out, they really did not know what to do next.
Mm-hmm.
What it came down to is a bunch of Blizzard execs looking at the pile of money that they're getting from an outside source and being that's worth more than the two casters who were there.
Mm-hmm.
And it sucks, but that's a lot of business decisions come down to money. It doesn't come down to skill. It doesn't come down to players. It doesn't come down to any of that. It's how they're going to maintain their ship and keep that afloat, rather than keep a bunch of smaller boats afloat. Because at the end of the day, if those casters and that player crash and burn, that's going to be a headline for a month and a half, and then they get to just go back to bathing in the subscriptions to WoW, the purchases made on Overwatch, and the purchases made for Diablo and StarCraft. Those are going to be what keeps them really afloat, and it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, bottom line, what this one player has said, because that one person speaking out, sure, there's this uproar in the community, sure, there's this call for accountability, but the thing is that a lot of things these days, just with the world in general, people are going to move on. People will find another thing to be angry about, and they will move on, which is why I'm actually pretty happy that we're going back and talking about this more, because I feel like this is definitely something that should not be overlooked, should not be cast by the wayside, because it's so damn important this day and age that we make sure that people still have the ability to express their minds, express their opinions. Sure, again, he picked a weird spot to do that, during a tournament, but also he knew that that would be the moment where he has the most eyes on him.
Mm-hmm.
And out of all the chances that he would have to say absolutely anything, like that was going to be the biggest one, and hell, it had a huge impact. Like
It did.
like people are still talking about it, and like the company had to think about how they do things, and now a lot of their like longtime fans are now wary of the company because they can see how fast they'll turn their backs on the community and players who absolutely like, you know, eat, breathe, and sleep their games. Like this guy, he isn't some just random like, you know, local tournament goer. This guy is like top of the line, like crazy good at the game, has invested so much time and so much money in order to get good and to be able to like show just the entire world the best way to play this game, and you're silencing them.
Mm-hmm.
That's just why.
So I have a series of talking points that I've basically picked out as like moments from the timeline that I've broken down into what's effectively the argument I'm going to be using to maybe defend Blizzard. I feel like the best place to start would just be from the beginning with getting a little more in depth on Blitzchung's ban, where it's been there's kind of two mindsets here. Some people say he should be banned, some people say that he shouldn't be banned or silenced. But I think at the end of the day, you can't deny that what he said was a political stance, and that is something that the Hearthstone handbook specifically touches on when it comes to political views, and specifically has a punishment for it, which is the reduction of your cash prize. And like that is something that should have been expected, and Blitzchung, as a professional esports player, he should have known the consequences. And it is pretty certain that he knew what he was getting himself into when he made that stand. And if he didn't, that's more his fault than it is Blizzard being mean, because as a professional, like, you should know what you're going into. And even if you're making a political statement, like, you should know, no matter where you are, there's going to be some kind of backlash in most circumstances.
I guess I can see that, but my big thing too is that, like I said earlier, a lot of people tend to skip over that stuff, like the individual players, because most of the time they have teams behind them that go through and they, like, you know, they tell them like what they can and can't do, and there's a lot of things that are just like, you know, common knowledge not to do. But with the like political turmoil and like the uproar and everything, it is surprising that they didn't expect something like that to happen.
Well, that kind of goes... You do make a fair point that, like, people usually have teams for things like that. They'll say, like, you know, do this, don't do that. But what Blitzchung did felt very on the spot. It didn't feel like it would have been completely rehearsed. And I'm not completely sure if the people, like, behind Blitzchung knew he was going to do that. Or if they did, like... even if they did, they could have thought of it as almost like a martyr almost, because like he had to have known that this like you don't make political statements on Blizzard platforms. Like, that is something that's very commonly seen in the company.
I thought you were going to say, oh yeah, you just don't make political opinion like pieces on the internet. But
no,
we looked at some of
the
our
internet's fine,
previous episodes,
but not through Blizzard usually.
Well, yeah, because like that is a game company. It is dedicated for video games.
And a lot of people criticize the ban that the casters got, and that how they were fired from the company. And I would say to that, like, they should have been able to diffuse what Blitzchung was doing. I have not had them... this was a Chinese live stream with people speaking in Chinese. So I can't completely confirm it, but some translations allegedly reveal that the casters were basically saying to Blitzchung, say the words, like they knew what he was doing, because they could see that he was putting on the mask and putting on the goggles. Like, they knew what he was going to do, and instead of trying to stop it or defuse anything, they ducked under their table, under their desk that they were sitting at, and giggled, and never did anything to stop him. Like, they knew it was coming, and they didn't do anything for it, which is just not how you should act when you're trying to keep the conversation on the game, and keeping it as, keeping the politics being discussed to a minimum, which is something that all of the official, Blizzard forum posts and discussions have mentioned, that the casters weren't acting very professionally when it came to diffusing Blitzchung's cry to liberate Hong Kong.
I don't know. I just feel like it's so strange still that, like, because I know that casters, like, each caster is going to be different. Like, you look at I keep using League of Legends casters, that because that's, like, you know, the competitive scene that I was super involved in for a while. Like, you look at the way that Shox goes about doing her job, and you look at the way that Dash goes about doing his job. They're two very different people, approach the same situation two very different ways. My big thing could be that like, well, for one, I know that this is a bit of a stretch, but I know that a lot of people, when they're nervous or uncomfortable, they do giggle. Like, that could be just like a reaction that they're having. And then also, like, the idea that if that clip were to circulate, those two, like, people, like, those announcers, those, like, commentators, they're going to have their faces, like, on those thumbnails, and people will see them. So, like, the idea of just like, oh god, duck under, he's going to be the one that takes the brunt of it, like, they'll know that it wasn't me. But it's intriguing that you bring up the whole thing with the translation of the, like, say the words, because I have not actually heard of that. I still think though that the treatment of the casters was very, very harsh, because honestly, I've seen situations where casters have been put in incredibly uncomfortable situations, and they've done things in a similar manner. Of course, like, those things did not involve politics that could affect, like, funding that the company would get, but they're still uncomfortable situations that, like, they did not know how to properly diffuse.
That's true. But I feel like part of the argument can be, if they didn't know how to properly diffuse it, then that is just a different kind of grounds for being fired. Because, like, they knew what he was going to do by putting on the masks, especially at a time where the 2019 protests were becoming pretty apparent, especially in China. And then instead of doing anything, they duck under their table. And you mentioned that it could be to kind of hide their faces, but if the stream is still there, like, people will know who those broadcasters are. So
well, people would know if you're part of the community. The big thing is that you talked about how, like, you know, Washington Post, New York Times, a bunch of different publications, like, had their faces, like, not their faces, but they had, like, you know, Blitzchung, his like, face, like, there. Like, they aren't part of the article, they aren't part of the thumbnail, because they ducked down. And unless you're part of that community, like, those names of those two casters, hell, like, I still don't know the names of the casters, because almost all of the articles only refers to them as the casters. Because the main focus of the story is Blitzchung.
It is. But that would be less true if Blizzard hadn't taken down the VOD, so people could replay it, because they would definitely be in there somewhere. And true. A lot of this also just falls under the handbook's ruling, where there's a specific section that's really important, which is in Blizzard's sole discretion, meaning they can effectively consider whatever they want to be inappropriate conduct. And I don't even necessarily think that's an inherently bad thing, because it's important to remember that Blizzard is a company, So, like, even you can even see this in plenty of other platforms like social media or even on YouTube. No matter how open or friendly a company claims to be, at the end of the day, they're a company still, so they can do whatever they want on their platform. And I don't really think it's something, you might not even necessarily like it, but you can't say that what they're doing is inherently wrong.
It's just, it feels like it's just such a horrible thing to do to someone who has put so much time and so much love and obvious care into the game. Like, people who play competitive and people who cast competitive, like, they are very passionate about what they're doing. Otherwise, they would not be there.
Exactly.
And so it's like a slap in the face to the people who, like, have worked their butts off to get to that position, only for someone to jump up and, like, cause everything to come, like, you know, falling down. And of course, I'm still in the camp of Blitzchung should not have had everything happen to him the way it did. Like, I believe free speech is like a big thing that all people should have, regardless of country, wherever. I will say, hate speech can go die. You know, that's not good. But like, I think in general, as far as speaking your mind, like, if there is injustice in the world, speaking up on it, like, that is so important. And just having that suppression makes me very upset. This is coming from the perspective of someone who has written for magazines and books before, where I have been forced to change things in order to better fit the publication. And while, like, there were very minor stuff, it still felt like a part of me was being lost in the work.
And to sort of, like, backpedal some of the things you said, it's interesting that you mentioned how the tournaments are meant to be about players at their peak performance to see the highest quality gameplay for that game, because is that fair to say?
Yeah, because, I mean, you definitely need to be at your peak or close to it in order to even qualify for one of those things.
That's actually where the community and Blizzard agree, because they think that their championships should be about the games and should be about the tournament itself and the players working their hardest in what they've been playing and practicing and learning about for a career. And to them, Blitzchung interrupted that by bringing politics into the platform, which is something that people tend to be a bit misformed on, because people see what happened to Blitzchung being banned for being pro-Hong Kong as being the reason why he was banned. He wasn't banned because he was pro-Hong Kong, no matter how much it seems like that. According to Blizzard, and just what makes sense from their guidelines and from many other perspectives, he was banned for being political, not for being pro-Hong Kong. And I think that if, just as some background information, Blitzchung is from Hong Kong, and that's part of why we think why he was advocating for Hong Kong, not just, you know, out of nowhere. It's because that's where he's from. If he was from another part of China and went into that interview and was anti-Hong Kong, people would probably be praising Blizzard for being pro-Hong Kong because of that. Or if he had given any other kind of political opinion, people would have, you know, been fine with it. But it's because they banned an opinion that is so widely believed that people had an outrage towards it. And as a way to kind of defend that sort of point, let's say Blizzard didn't ban Blitzchung for making that political statement. And, you know, it would have just gone by, no one would have, like, necessarily cared about it even. People would have just been like, oh yeah, pro-Hong Kong. Let's say at the next championship, you have someone else from somewhere else in China, and they were pro-China. People might be like, oh, this player's, you know, got some opinions, like whatever, maybe like a bit of rise on that. And then what would, as a bit of an extreme hypothetical, what would stop someone from spreading a sexist opinion? or someone winning the grand final championships, winning first place, and going out and saying how black people are inherently inferior to white people. Like, if you don't stop political opinions, where does it stop? If you don't prevent your platform from being a site of political discussion, where do you stop it? If his opinion wasn't so popular, people wouldn't be as mad at Blizzard about it.
This whole situation is just very tricky. Because like, as we're trying to do, you're thinking about the side of, like, you know, the company and corporate and how they have to keep their image and everything. And then I'm thinking of the side of, like, the gaming community and just, you know, everyone who has been affected by the decisions that are being made. Like, it's such a hard thing for them to find a balance for it, and I don't think that there ever will be an answer that fully satisfies everyone.
What gets even harder to find the balance is, I've been trying to argue from a very company-centric standpoint, and a lot of people think of it as, oh, Blizzard is just selling out to China, it's so obvious. If it was so obvious, and they were thinking purely as a company, why would they ban Blitzchung for a year, take away his earnings, fire the casters, and then, after all of the outrage, go back on the bans that their handbook specifically said would be given out to people who violated their code of conduct? Like, if they were completely owned by China, they wouldn't have reduced the ban, and they wouldn't have given him back the prize money that the handbook specifically said would be revoked. I think Blizzard has a little bit more heart and integrity than people would normally think a company would. Because if they were completely sold out to China, they wouldn't have revoked the ban because people got angry. China is not known to revoke things because people are angry.
That you also have to just look at, like, the stake that Tencent has in the company. Like,
exactly.
As far as a lot of companies go, Blizzard actually doesn't have too much of it owned by Tencent. Meanwhile, you have, you know, League of Legends by Riot Games. It's 100% owned by Tencent.
And then you have Epic Games that's about, like, 50% owned.
Yeah, like, China is a huge market for video games. Like, absolutely huge. Why do you think mobile games are, like, more successful than they ever have been before?
Yeah.
Because China's mobile game market is insane.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane compared to, like, consoles, because I believe China, didn't they have an embargo or some kind of ban on consoles in the 90s?
Ooh, I don't remember that point.
I remember there was a few places around that just had, like, I'm going to look this up because I remember just seeing about how, like, there were these knockoff consoles that were made that were wicked cheap. It might have been for China or for Russia. I need to take a look, though.
What is interesting about China, after looking into, specifically looking into the Chinese Twitter account, from now on I'm going to be calling it Weibo. On Hearthstone's Weibo post that talked about holding the integrity and the pride of China in such high regard. People usually went to that as like, oh, this must be like what Blizzard actually feels because, they're selling out to China and things like that. And I kind of came to two sort of conclusions to explain the Weibo post. And one...
Oh, and real quick before you go into them, I do want to just confirm, yes, there was a near complete ban on video game consoles into the year 2000 because of the huge fear of kids getting addicted to them. And the ban was ultimately lifted in 2015, but because of a huge growth of bootleg consoles and shipping out games and stuff from 2007 to 2013, it led game publishers and operating companies like the aforementioned Tencent and NetEase to become like huge companies in the global space because of just how big the demand was for games.
Yeah. So the first explanation I could think of for the Hearthstone Weibo post, it might not be the most likely possibility, but I still think it's something to consider and something to just, like, remind yourself of. It could just be from the social media manager, and, like, that is just their opinion, because it would be from the Chinese branch of Blizzard and Hearthstone as a whole. And, you know, it has its own social media manager that's making the post. It's not impossible that that's just the point that they were expressing, and that's the opinion that they decided to post about on the situation. It might not necessarily represent the company. I mean, here in America, we have, like, fast food chains, like, roasting each other and, like, making jokes at one another, like, all the time. And there are even examples of times where social media managers have been fired because they said something that the higher-ups in the company didn't agree with. So it's not even impossible that it's just one person making this post on behalf of the entire company of Blizzard. The second possibility that I think could be more likely is it could just be it could be Chinese influence from outside of Blizzard, in the fact that Weibo has an alleged history, because things in China are kind of, behind closed curtains. Weibo's been known to be very much controlled by the Chinese government. And so,
100%.
It's been known that posts on Weibo have been changed to fit the government's agenda. And it is not impossible that this is just another case of it. Because
it's supposed to be like a cautionary tale?
In a way, because if you look at every other official post by Blizzard, an American company, and you look at their US-based posts in English, they all have very similar ways of conducting themselves and holding themselves to a certain standard. And then you look at the Weibo post, and it is so angry and strict
and aggressive.
Like, it has a very specific feel to it. It is not like anything else.
It's less of like, you know, a slap on the wrist and say don't do it again, to like being like, you are in timeout for the rest of the week.
Exactly. And even like the US posts are so much more like professional and formal, and then this is like, you know, this is a disgrace to the, you know, Chinese name kind of feel to it. Like it feels like a scolding, like, rather than
this sounds okay. So this sounds so stupid, but it literally falls into the, like, you know, that stereotype of like, you've dishonored our family.
Exactly.
Kind of thing. It has that same very strict ideology.
So if it feels so clearly influenced by the Chinese government, why are people quoting this as how Blizzard actually feels? It's,
again, like, people are quick to shoot the messenger. I know that I personally was.
Mm-hmm. Even I was when I first heard about it.
Yeah, Blizzard's just trying to do damage control, and they don't know how to do it, like, in the best way possible. Like, I mean, right now the information, like, everything's kind of died down. There's still, like, a lot of people who are angry, for good reason. But, like, I just feel like this is just an important sort of issue to look at, because one, it's suppression of speech. It's always a no-no. Two, it shows just how quick some people are to jump on a bandwagon that they don't know anything about.
Mm-hmm.
Especially, like, for people outside of the gaming sphere, of just, like, the amount of wide coverage, and, like, there's already enough fear-mongering right now when it comes to other, like, countries being involved with like, US-type stuff. And, I mean, some of that is fact, some of it is fiction, but, like, it's so easy to get people riled up when it comes to privacy and security that, like, the moment that they hear, oh, something else is in control, that's enough to make people start to kind of quake in their boots, you know?
If you want to get out of the gaming sphere, I have a couple of examples of other times that other companies fucked up and nobody seemed to care as much. So, Apple in and of itself is quite the offender. Things like how Tim Cook defended Apple's removal of a Hong Kong mapping app that would show civilians where the police are. They just removed that from the App Store. Apple's iCloud user data in China is now handled by a state-owned mobile operator. And the time where Apple said that China's Muslims were targeted in the recent iPhone hacking campaign. It's a bit interesting that those all correlated in a relatively short amount of time.
Literally, it's just, I mean, personally, I've had no respect for Apple as a company.
Oh, don't worry, there's plenty of other companies, like how Vans removed a Hong Kong sneaker design in a competition, ESPN forbade discussion of Chinese politics. Interestingly related, Reddit took $150 million from China, which coincidentally banned posts from ESPN banning Chinese politics.
Yeah, and wasn't there that whole thing about like how basketball players were interviewed and they were just like, China's always been very good to us. Like, why would we ever say anything bad? There's Cathay, which was denounced for firing Hong Kong staff after pressure from China. There was the Gap that apologized to China over a map on a t-shirt that omitted Taiwan. And even TikTok has been known to censor videos that do not please Beijing because they mention Tiananmen Square and Tibet independence. No. Okay.
And then there was...
if this does not show how many companies have, like, influence from China, funding from China, and, like, get a lot of kickback from China, I don't know what else you need to convince, like, people. Because it's just, like... It's so obvious that there is that fear of losing that connection because of just how fast China is growing as a global market. And because, like, not only was it like a crazy good industry like type continent, because like look at I dare the listener to look at 5 things they own and see how many of those things say made in China or made in Taiwan.
And the thing is, these are only the examples that I found. There are thousands. There are thousands of other examples of companies making these kinds of mistakes, as a way to put it, and having these problems that I haven't mentioned. Many of these companies have probably made these mistakes multiple times over. And other than like...
Oh god, yeah. Apple?
Other than...
Apple never learns. What Apple does is that they load a gun, they shoot it at their foot, they scream in pain for like an hour, then they reload the gun and aim it at the foot again, and they just go, I guess it wouldn't happen again, right?
Other than like ESPN making the news for a little bit, like, I honestly hadn't heard most of these stories. Like, other than that making it in the news for a little bit because some basketball stars were like, ooh, China's nice because we're owned by China. Like, no, I don't know how many people heard about the Vans sneaker being removed because it was pro-Hong Kong, or Reddit taking millions of dollars to ban posts out of, themselves, or the Gap or TikTok having involvements with China and apologizing to China.
That's the thing, is that in this swamp that we have of just immediate information in an online space, it's so easy for people to just forget. It's so easy for people just to move on from issues and not actually take the time to look at them in full, discuss them in full, and figure out everything in full. Like, right now, the big hot button topic, at least in the US, is the impeachment hearings. Like, you go on Twitter, you go on Facebook, it's all over the place. Like, people are no longer talking about this because in their eyes, it's no longer relevant.
However, what Blizzard's controversy did, in an admittedly unfortunate way, it just opened the door to people seeing, like, how much China controls everything. Like, this is a slip-up that made it through the gaps that people, like, knew about on a large public scale, that could very possibly unleash all of the things that China has been involved with and censored and, closed off.
Like, that's like the whole thing where like, what's the saying where it's like, if there's a loose string, or like a loose string on a yarn, eventually no ball will be left because the whole thing comes undone.
Yeah.
I know that's probably not the exact saying, but it's like the same similar thing where like if you have a loose thread on a t-shirt, you keep tugging on that, it's going to get like tighter and tighter and things are going to fall off. Like that's just how it's going to work. And the Blizzard situation was that thread.
Exactly. And it's just now that everything's sort of coming into view.
Yeah. And my personal hope is that, like, while it would be horrible for more events to happen like this, we need stuff like this where it makes people question what's going on in the world around them. Because I feel like too many people are just complacent and they accept the way that things are around them. They don't question it. They don't look deeper into it. And I think that's a damn shame.
Yeah. And I feel like something that's interesting to talk about is the boycotts that surrounded Blizzard after the events, between the fans and the employees walking out. This is more about my personal opinions and beliefs than it is about defending Blizzard in this sense, but honestly, boycotts aren't as effective as a lot of people think that they are. Like,
they think that because they choose not to do a certain thing that the company will go quake in their boots, when really there are hundreds of thousands of other players who are still playing and still active.
It can be great for raising awareness, but a boycott isn't going to change anything. Like, it's basically just the real life version of change.org.
Yeah, they get a dip in sales and that's it.
Yeah. And
in like a headline appears on BuzzFeed.
And admittedly, a lot of the outcry did get Blizzard to reduce the sentence and reduce some of the punishments, which was good. But for the most part, refusing to play Blizzard games isn't going to do anything. The money you've spent on their games has already been spent. If you're not, giving them more money, if you're not continuing your World of Warcraft subscription, if you're not paying for loot boxes and card packs and paying for their new games, that's fine. Like, that's a way of, as what's almost become a saying, voting with your wallet. But, they already have the money that you've given them, so you're not, supporting them by playing on their servers necessarily. They might have numbers to brag about with playtime, but if anything, you might be costing them by forcing them to run their servers constantly without, giving them your money. It's not a ton of money to hold servers for such a huge company, but, as long as you're not giving them money, you don't have to stop playing their games.
It's just a lot to unpack, and I like to think that you actually did a very good job with grabbing things and actually bringing more things to light, because there is a lot of misinformation around there.
Yeah.
I had some misconceptions too going into this, because when you said that we were going to do more of a deep dive this time around, which, I mean, honestly, I'd love to do this more often. Maybe not for every episode, but maybe maybe a few episodes here and there we can go real deep into one thing in particular. Yeah,
and even doing research for this, there's things where people said that it was tens of thousands of dollars. There's people saying first place winner at Hearthstone, well, he was banned before the competition ended. And there was a lot of misinformation that I decided I would clear up, and we've been talking about this for almost an hour at this point, and I feel like it would be a good time for me to kind of wrap up my argument and my defense of Blizzard. And
is it cool if I do mine real quick?
Yeah, sure.
Blizzard bad, give me likes. Your turn. No, sorry. I'm sorry.
No problem.
After that very intelligent conversation, just give me likes. I mean, you already know my stance. We've talked about it a few times.
I think it would be important for me to or at least more clearly state what my personal opinion is on the situation. I might be defending Blizzard, but I'm not working for Blizzard, so I have my own opinion. I believe that Blitzchung and the casters deserved to be punished for what happened at the Hearthstone Grandmasters tournament. But I don't think it should have been as harsh as it was. I understand that Blizzard had to act when one of the players went against the code of conduct and got political on their platform where they want to focus on the games, not on the political situations around the world. I think they were a little bit harsh, and I think they recognized that they were a bit harsh. And I honestly appreciate that they pulled back on the punishment that was specifically outlined in their handbook. So, they had to act as fast as they did because they didn't want him in the tournament, so they needed to ban him. However, they banned him for too long, and they realized that. And sure, they could have acted faster than the 5 days it took them to make an official statement on the revoking of the punishments. But I think they did the best that they could out of the bad situation, where they were damned if they banned him, and they were damned if they didn't. I think they played it fairly well for how it went down.
Yeah, I can see that.
So, I'm not a complete sellout, but I do think Blizzard deserves a little bit more respect than they've gotten. I think they handled it well for people who had to shut down a popular opinion.
I actually respect like how you feel, because that's kind of similar to me, where it's like I see why they needed to do what they did, but also like little harsh.
It was harsh, and that is, even the people who sympathize with Blizzard will admit that it was a bit harsh, because the length of the ban was not specifically outlined in their handbook. Only that they would be removed from the tournament at play, and that the prize money would be revoked. It doesn't say an entire year. And there are people, even working at Blizzard, the head of the Overwatch team, Jeff Kaplan, made a statement saying that 6 months was too long. So there are people who are even mad at that reduction. And even for me, I think 6 months is a little bit long, maybe closer to like 3 months per se. Or this was back in October. If they just removed him from competition for like the rest of 2019 and then 2020 was its own like fresh start, that would have been better. But I do appreciate that they listened to the community, didn't just stick to their guns, and they were able to reduce the punishment.
Yeah, I respect that too. But do you have anything else you want to say, or should we start wrapping this up?
Leave a comment guessing how much money Blizzard and China gave me to make this podcast.
Oh my god, really?
Yeah.
Really?
I mean,
we're not...
And honestly, like, if people want to carry on this conversation in the comments, feel free to do so.
Yeah, no, go for that, but like, I don't want to beg for likes.
You're the one that asked for likes.
I didn't say, I said don't. Oh, you're talking about the Blizzard bad, give me likes.
Yeah.
Oh.
But like, yeah, feel free to like carry on the conversation like down below. I will probably be looking at this pretty frequently and responding to any comments that want to carry it on. And yeah.
I will say, just hope that I hope that whatever discussions we have in the comments are more than just that's whack, and it's just being like, why is it whack? And the other person just being like, cool, well,
or
I don't know.
Or actually trying to guess how much money I've been given to say this. Here's a hint.
Yeah.
$0.
You just looked at the comments and it's just like $20, and you just reply with, not too far off.
I got 3 months WoW subscription.
Yeah.
Or
you got 3 months WoW
or
subscription.
$45.
And a golden loot crate.
Yeah. So that
Anyways.
wraps up this episode of the Pixel Venture podcast.
Yeah. Thank you for listening. We're going to have a bit more of, I guess, a traditional episode for our podcast next week. But if you want us to do these deep dives more, definitely let us know. This was actually a lot of fun to record.
And you know what? If you have a topic you want us to talk about, feel free to leave that down below too.
Yeah, we'll figure out a way to incorporate it, whether it's just in a normal episode or if we really want to do a deep dive.
Yeah.
But yeah, aside from that, thank you for listening to this episode of the Pixel Venture podcast. I've been Corey.
And I've been Jake.
This is so weird having you do normal intros and outros.
I know. This isn't a usual episode, Corey.
See you guys next week.
See ya.